Welcome to Sensitivity Sessions, a podcast for highly sensitive people about appreciating sensitivity and finding purpose as an HSP. I'm your host, Stephanie Gardner-Wright, a licensed psychotherapist and HSP coach. On today's episode, we are talking about HSPs and empaths. Are empaths the same thing as HSPs, and are there any differences? So, arguably, I'd say that the term HSP is something that isn't as well known as the term empath. Maybe your experience is different. If so, I would love to hear about it. But it's been my sense that more people are at least maybe passingly familiar with the term empath. So, empath has really been a term that maybe a lot of people would associate with Dr. Judith Orloff, who's been one of the best selling authors who writes books by and for empaths. With the HSP trait, that's something that a lot of people would associate with Dr. Lane Aaron, who has done the initial groundbreaking research on the highly sensitive trait. Certainly not the only research by any means, because there's several other researchers currently doing research. So, in my opinion, when we're talking about HSPs and empaths, we are talking about sensitivity and how it can manifest in different ways, and also how it can be a little bit more nuanced than maybe we might initially believe. So there is the highly sensitive trait, which of course is something that 30% of people have. And it means that you are experiencing an increased depth of processing everything in your environment. So you notice things more deeply, you need more quiet and restorative time where you can really feel like you reconnect back with yourself. And those are largely things that fit empaths as well. Many empaths are also HSPs and have that same trait of sensitivity, higher sensitivity. We know that sensitivity is a continuum. So there's low sensitivity, there's medium sensitivity, and then high sensitivity. And those are all normal, but our empaths and obviously highly sensitive people do fall on that farther end of that continuum over towards highly sensitive. So then, if empaths are similar to highly sensitive folks, what's the difference, if any? So here's the difference. Empaths can actually feel and absorb energy within their own bodies, or if you believe in subtle energy fields, in the Eastern philosophies and traditions, we would call this energy prana or shakti. And empaths are very acutely aware of that. Now, I would argue the HSPs are as well. And again, we might be talking about two different sides of the same coin here. We're talking about high sensitivity, it's just a matter of degrees. So, a lot of HSPs will talk about having the experience of walking into a room where there was just a tense argument, for example, and they can feel, even if they don't know that an argument just happened and the room's empty, they can feel the tension in the room. And that's when you'd think, oh, there's something happening here. Is the tension so thick that I can cut it with a knife? So that's something that a more sensitive person will pick up. You'll notice that. However, the difference is an empath could conceivably actually soak up that feeling of tension that would be in that room with the people had just had the argument. They could take on those emotions of anger, soak up any feelings of uncertainty, and go about their day not being sure where that came from. So here's my definition of an empath versus an HSP. And I see empaths as maybe another layer on top of the highly sensitive trait. So I don't know for sure that all empaths are HSPs. There's really no research at all on empaths that I'm aware of, because empath is unfortunately not a term that the scientific community um, has been researching or has been funded to research. And it's a lot of the things are not observable. We can't measure, we can't quantitatively assess how someone may be absorbing energy. That's just not something that we have any scientific measurements that are sensitive enough to pick up. So that's one piece of this. We don't have any data, whereas we have tons of data on highly sensitive people. The formal research has been going back 40 years now, and before that, 100 years ago, wrote about temperamental sensitivity, and other researchers who are well known have as well. Okay, I got a little sidetracked there because I get passionate about the research. So, back to my definition of what an empath would be. In my experience and in my definition, an empath is someone who is exquisitely aware of energy. They are very aware of how energy works. They might not be able to articulate that as such, but they can sense when the feeling in a crowd shifts, or they can pick up what's in what Jung called the collective unconscious, what the collective feeling, some people might call it the zeitgeist, of how everyone globally is feeling right now. And they're very acutely aware of that. Some empaths may really feel and experience the pain of, say, for example, the Amazon being on fire, or environmental tragedies and loss, animal pain and suffering. They may be aware of that and be able to feel and sense that in a way that goes simply beyond knowing and being empathetic that another person or creature is in pain. So I know you're thinking at this point, so being an empath is caused by trauma, then, right? And the answer is not necessarily. It's not so simple. And since you're on this podcast and you are likely more highly sensitive, I think you are probably more comfortable with nuance than your average person and can have the capacity to hold two things at one time that can be true. So, yes, being an empath can be influenced or perhaps even caused by trauma, but in my experience and belief, it simply isn't an automatic equation, just like being a highly sensitive person is not caused by trauma. And we do know that from the research. So, if we can extrapolate off that research, and again, we're talking about degrees of sensitivity here. So, we know that highly sensitive people are born that way. They're innately highly sensitive, and trauma can influence their experience in the world as highly sensitive people, but it does not mean that it has caused their innate sensitivity. So it's similar with empaths in that empaths are, again, much more aware, and they have an intuitive understanding of the subtle energy that we're all in and steeped in all the time. They're just able to intuit, see, or feel that more than most people can. Does that mean that they're traumatized? No. Does it mean that maybe they've had trauma and it has exacerbated some of the maybe more difficult points of being able to sense other pain? Yeah. So let's talk very generally about when being an empath may be influenced or may be caused by trauma. I'm shifting into my therapist brain. In my experience as a clinician, when someone is feeling like they have no control over soaking up other people's energy, or from absorbing pain or negative emotion, or if you feel like there is no choice and you are doomed to do that, you have to cloister yourself at home to avoid soaking that up. Like maybe you're feeling like you can't go out in a crowd because it's going to feel like a attack of so many negative feelings that you can pick up and take home with you. That, in my view, would be typically more influenced by trauma. Being able to tap into the energy of something and being able to carry that with you is not in itself trauma. Again, you're just more sensitive to the energy that influences everything. But to feel like you must take that on, you have no choice to take someone else's pain on, that's a trauma belief. And those are the kind of beliefs that we've had when we've been victimized at some point in our lives. So that may be early on, early childhood development, where we've gotten the message either verbally or non verbally that we are not in control of our own bodies or experience, that our experience is less important than someone else's, or even that we have to take on the pain of someone else. And we might see this, for instance, in a situation where a parent or a caregiver is chronically ill, or they have some mental health issues, whether diagnosed or not diagnosed, that are severe enough to warrant a child feeling like they would need to take on that pain, and in their innocent love, where they don't want a parent to suffer, and it enables them to get their survival needs met because they need to be cared at a most basic level. So this can be something that we carry into our adult life without even realizing it. This pattern of feeling like we can't set boundaries, whether those are verbal limits or more energetic limits with our time, our caring, overextending ourselves. Those are ways that we aren't setting boundaries at times, which are displaying those energetic gaps and those energetic leakages underneath. If you've heard of energy vampires, those are often people that are attracted to those that are more empathic, and not in a nefarious way. They are in pain as well and they need to fulfill a need. But many empaths are people that are Empathic, highly sensitive folks feel that they need to listen, that they need to be there for the venting, that they can't hang up the phone, for instance. And those are things where we don't have a strong sense of self and can't attune to our own needs to where that would indicate some wounding of some kind, potentially some trauma. So, if you are empathic, the biggest thing that you might be wondering at this point is how can I stop soaking up everybody's stuff? How do I stop absorbing energy when I don't want to? So, part of this is a beliefs issue, like we just talked about a minute ago. And when we believe that we have no choice but to overextend ourselves and to take on other people's problems, which manifested at the energetic level of feeling like we can't set that limit, then we will continue to have this feeling of being a victim to other people's energies. And we can shift out of that victim mindset. Sometimes it's longer, deep inner work that we might be doing, but it is absolutely possible. So, beliefs about what you deserve or what you get to say no to or to keep out of your own life or your energy field is vital. And another way that we can do that is by proactively practicing tools such as energy hygiene techniques. So those would be things like visualizing clearing any energy out that isn't yours. You can visualize returning to sender, returning to someone's higher self or higher power, any energy that they are sending your way that doesn't feel good for you. And then you let that person sort it out, and it is no longer your problem to deal with or your issue to fix. Something else that's really helpful for all sensitive folks, whether you identify as an HSP, an empath, or something else, is earthing or being outside in nature in a way that's grounding. So, earthing is when you put your bare feet on the earth. You can do this all seasons of the year, just depending on whether you may live in a northern climate and want snow on your feet or not. But this is something that can be beneficial all year round. And it's believed that the electrons of the earth can help to reset some of the things in our electric field. But whether you believe that or not, it is really helpful. And a lot of people just notice feeling better from doing it. And being in nature in general, away from other people's energy, allows you to reconnect with yourself at a deeper level. It allows you to reconnect with your more essential self so you can feel what it feels like to be grounded within your own energy. Because when we're empathic, we are often feeling other people's. Hey, Lawrence, my son just came in. If you're on video, you saw him just now. But if you are empathic, you're typically soaking in other people's feelings and experiences and thought patterns that you are picking up at an energetic level so much that you are not sure what it feels like to be in your own energy and what it feels like to be you. Another effective thing that you can do is when you notice intense emotions or maybe physical pains that didn't feel like they were there before, asking yourself, whose emotion am I feeling? Is it mine or is it someone else's? Whose pain am I feeling? Is it mine or is it someone else's? And this really can help you to get a good baseline of when you're in your own energy and your own frequency, and if it is yours or if you are starting to shift into someone else's experience, because we often don't know until we start practicing as more empathic people. So I hope this was helpful for you. That's our show for today. Thanks so much for joining me, Stephanie Gardner-Wright, on this episode of the Sensitivity Sessions. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a review if you got something from this episode. Thanks so much, and I'll chat with you next time.